Welcome back to Hardware Unboxed. Today we are dusting off the old GeForce RTX 2070 to see how it holds up today against the newer RTX 4070. Of course, the RTX 4070 is going to be faster. The question is how much faster, and is it a viable upgrade for those of you who've been holding out for the past 5 years or so? To find out, I of course have a 40 game benchmark covering the 1080p, 1440p and 4K resolutions, but before I get into the results, today's sponsor spot is brought to you by Skytech Gaming, a provider of pre-built gaming PCs in California. They offer lifetime technical support backed by well-trained customer support, and all their systems feature a 1-year parts warranty. One of their newest pre-builts is the Azure 2, which Skytech Gaming sent over for us to check out. This is a well put together PC that looks great, the BIOS has been tuned for optimal cooling and noise performance, and the cable management is extremely neat. It features the new GeForce RTX 4070 along with the Core i5-13600K, and this allows it to deliver impressive mid-range performance, while supporting all the latest and greatest features such as DLSS 3 frame generation, ray tracing, and AV1 encoding. So, to get the right PC built for you, check out the link in the video description. Okay, so as I noted a moment ago, the RTX 2070 is now a 5-year-old product. Time flies, I feel old, but I'll stay on topic. It was first released back in October of 2018 at an MSRP of $500 US, or $600 US if you're willing to get rolled on the Founders Edition model, which we recommended you didn't. Anyway, let's just say $500 US, and that means 5 years later, you now have the opportunity to purchase an RTX 4070 for $100 more at $600 US. But is it finally time to upgrade? There's not too much point digging into the specs, as each GPU is based on an entirely different architecture using very different manufacturing processes. So apart from the obvious architectural differences, the RTX 2070 came with 8GB of 14 gigabits per second GDDR6 memory, whereas the RTX 4070 has been upgraded with 12GB of 21 gigabits per second GDDR6X memory. Certainly not a massive upgrade after 5 years. I'd certainly have expected back in 2018 that by 2023, the $600 price point from Nvidia would offer at least 16 gigabytes of VRAM, if not more, but sadly, that's just not the case. Still, the RTX 4070 does offer a number of big upgrades over the RTX 2070, such as DLSS 3 frame generation, AV1 encoding, improved efficiency, better ray tracing support, and of course, better performance in general. And that's what we're about to take a look at today. For testing, the CPU used is the Ryzen 7 7800X 3D, which has been paired with the Gigabyte X670 eAorus Master, using 32GB of DDR5 6000 CL30 memory. As usual, we'll go over the data for around a dozen titles before jumping into the big breakdown graphs, and the resolutions of interest here are 1080p, 1440p and 4K, so let's get into it. Starting with Cyberpunk 2077 using the high quality preset with ray tracing effects disabled, we find that the RTX 4070 is 84% faster than the 2070 at 1080p, 88% faster at 1440p and then 76% faster at 4K. Though even the 4070 really isn't viable here, at least not without the help of upscaling. The results at 1440p are night and day different, and at 1080p you can enjoy high refresh rate performance with the RTX 4070. Where the GeForce 20 series was a major letdown in my opinion was the ray tracing performance, something that was meant to be a bit special about that series. But even at 1080p, with any kind of meaningful degree of ray tracing enabled, the performance just completely tanks to unplayable levels, and even with the aid of DLSS, performance is going to be very underwhelming. The RTX 4070, on the other hand, delivered 132% more performance at 1080p, and even without DLSS was able to deliver playable performance. Granted, 58 FPS on average is not amazing, but at least now, 2 generations later, ray tracing is viable. Right, so those of you playing Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 will really enjoy massive performance gains when upgrading from a 2070 to a 4070, as we saw a massive 117% uplift at 1080p, 118% at 1440p, and then 114% at 4K. Those are obviously some incredible performance gains, and they make the 4070 well worth the upgrade for those of you who've been holding out. A Plague Tale Requiem is an impressive looking game that you can fully appreciate using an RTX 4070 without the need of upscaling at resolutions up to 1440p, while 4K is still possible at 60 FPS using DLSS. When compared to the 2070, you're looking at a 93% performance boost at 1080p, 72% at 1440p, and then 70% at 4K. So again, huge performance gains on offer here with the new RTX 4070. The Callisto Protocol using the highest quality presets a breeze for the RTX 4070, delivering 92 FPS at 4K, and this meant it was 114% faster than the RTX 2070. The 2070 was certainly capable at 1080p and even a decent option at 1440p, but 4K was just too much for the old mid-range GPU. Where the old 8GB graphics card fails completely though, is with ray tracing enabled, as the game really calls for over 9GB of memory. Even at 1080p, the 2070 suffered from major frame stutters and was completely unusable at 1440p and above. The RTX 4070 on the other hand, that was usable at 1440p, and with upscaling would probably work at 4K. We're looking at a 610% improvement at 1440p, as the 2070 is essentially broken, so needless to say the 4070 is a big upgrade here if you want to use ray tracing in a game like the Callisto Protocol. Moving on to Fortnite using the DirectX 11 mode, we see that the RTX 4070 is roughly twice as fast as the 2070 at all three tested resolutions. Using the epic quality settings, the 2070 is good for just 86 FPS at 1080p, whereas the 4070 was able to average 171 FPS, so that's a 99% increase. Let's just call it twice the performance. Then once again with ray tracing enabled, we see that the RTX 2070 falls in a heap, reduced to just 22 FPS at 1080p. The RTX 4070 on the other hand, that was seen to be almost 200% faster, hitting 65 FPS at the same resolution. So for those of you who want to play Fortnite with all the eye candy turned on, the 4070 can deliver playable performance at 1080p, and will be capable at 1440p with some help from upscaling. Playing Resident Evil 4 without ray tracing enabled, that's possible on an RTX 2070 at over 60 FPS at 1080p and just shy of 60 FPS at 1440p. So while certainly capable of playable performance, the RTX 4070 was 126% faster at 1080p, 120% faster at 1440p, and then 106% faster at 4K. Interestingly, enabling the maximum quality preset doesn't reduce performance all that much for the RTX 2070 at 1080p and 1440p, though understandably does break performance at 4K. Still, although the 2070 did deliver a playable 66 FPS at 1080p, the 4070 was 88% faster, hitting 124 FPS, so that's another big performance upgrade there. Spider-Man Remastered is one of the better optimized games to be released in the last few years, and it shows with 118 FPS using the RTX 2070 at 1080p with the maximum quality preset. We're even looking at 84 FPS at 1440p, and really 48 FPS, while less than ideal, is still quite an impressive result for the old 2070 at 4K. The RTX 4070 does offer an 81% boost at 1080p, 89% at 1440p, and then 85% at 4K. So some very strong performance gains there that will be particularly noticeable at 1440p and 4K. Even with ray tracing enabled, the RTX 2070 was impressive at 1080p and 1440p, delivering highly playable performance. Still, if you demand more performance, then the 4070 will certainly deliver with 60% more frames at 1080p and 92% more at 1440p, while 4K gaming will become a reality with 82 FPS on average. Now, RTX 2070 owners who play a lot of F1 22 and aren't interested in ray tracing probably won't find themselves in desperate need of an upgrade, given that the 5-year-old GPU is still good for 154 FPS at 1080p and 116 FPS at 1440p. In fact, the 71 FPS seen at 4K will probably be acceptable for most. And remember, we are testing using the highest quality preset, but with the RTFX disabled. If you are gaming at 4K though, the RTX 4070 upgrade will double your frame rate, so still pretty substantial there. But where the 4070 upgrade starts to become necessary in F1 22 is for gamers who want to enable ray tracing, which I personally don't think is worth it in this title, but of course your opinion may differ, and if it does happen to differ, you'll be looking at a 100% or better performance uplift, so that is a significant increase to say the least. Forza Horizon 5 is a modern game that looks amazing and can still be enjoyed with an RTX 2070, even with the visual settings maxed out at 1440p. But if you're after a high refresh rate experience with maximum graphical fidelity, then the RTX 4070 will provide that, boosting the 1080p performance by a whopping 104%, or 1440p by 100%, and then 4K by 109%. So very impressive gains across the board there. Now, Dying Light 2, that plays quite well in the RTX 2070 at 1080p, but for those of you targeting 1440p, upscaling will certainly be required, and of course at 4K, that's just going to be out of the question. Even at 1080p though, the RTX 4070 is 90% faster and then 85% faster at 1440p, so the performance boost on offer here from the upgrade is massive. Then, as we've seen multiple times now, it is modern ray tracing titles where the RTX 4070 is the biggest upgrade over something like a 2070. Not only is performance boosted by over 150% at 1080p, the game's now actually playable with ray tracing enabled. Star Wars Jedi Survivor is playable at 1080p using the maximum visual quality preset with ray tracing disabled on the RTX 2070, though you are only looking at getting around 60 FPS at 1080p, and then near unplayable performance at 1440p. Meanwhile, the RTX 4070 was 95% faster at 1080p and then 97% faster at 1440p, while 4K is still out of the question without the aid of upscaling, and right now, the game officially only supports FSR, and that's unlikely to change anytime soon. The Last of Us Part 1 is the last game we're going to look at, and it's playable on an RTX 2070, but not with the ultra quality settings, which we've used for testing. Dialing down to high will work at 1080p, but not 1440p, and then ideally you'll want to use medium. And this is more to do with the 8GB VRAM buffer than it is processing power. So the RTX 2070 is broken under these test conditions, allowing the RTX 4070 to deliver 160% more performance at 1080p. Okay, so we've just had a look at almost a dozen of the 40 games tested, some with and without ray tracing enabled. Now it's time to see how these two GPUs compare across all of the games tested. So let's go do that, and we'll start with the 1080p data. Well, that's kind of nice, a round figure there. Across all of the games and configurations tested, the RTX 4070 was on average 100% faster than the 2070 at 1080p. So in other words, 2070 owners can expect a massive performance upgrade at 1080p when purchasing an RTX 4070. The only exceptions, of course, will be CPU-bound games like Counter-Strike Global Offensive, as in that example we saw no improvement. But outside of that, it seems worst case you'll be looking at least a 50% gain, with best case more like 150% or more. And it is much the same at 1440p. Here the RTX 4070 was on average 102% faster, though really it was 112% faster, but I removed the Callisto Protocol ray tracing result as the 2070 was broken here, leading to a 610% uplift for the 4070. In any case, the 4070 was much faster at 1440p and in many instances was able to deliver highly playable performance with maximum graphical fidelity, whereas the 2070 was struggling and even failing to deliver playable performance. Where the 2070 really struggled the most was with ray tracing enabled, and we see that in titles such as Fortnite, Cyberpunk 2077, and Dying Light 2. So there you have it. That's how the RTX 4070 and RTX 2070 compare across a massive sample of games. And I've got to say, having not looked at an RTX 2070 closely for some time now, we've got to update all our data, so I've had to focus on the current and just previous generations and the most recent previous generation models. Haven't had time to go back and look at the GeForce 20 series. So I'd sort of forgotten, dare I say, how slow it is, at least by today's standards. And really, as underwhelming as the 4070 is, it's really the least underwhelming, or it's no more underwhelming than any of the other current generation GPUs. Because in terms of price to performance, it's actually the best thing we've seen, priced over $500 US in the last 2 years, at least released in the last 2 years, or 2.5 years. So, yeah, certainly underwhelming, but also, I hate to say it, this is the best value GPU released from either AMD or Nvidia that we've received, priced over $500 US. Best price to performance. The truth is, the bulk of these gains were made with the RTX 3070, which also cost $500 like the 2070 that came before it. Sadly though, there wasn't an upgrade in terms of VRAM capacity with just 8GB, but it was a massive upgrade in terms of performance, offering on average around a 60% boost. So that was certainly very exciting at the time. Just 2 years after the release of the RTX 2070, the 3070 came along offering around 60% more performance at the exact same price. The RTX 4070, on the other hand, that's arriving 2.5 years after the RTX 3070, and while it has upgraded the VRAM capacity to 12GB, which is still a minor improvement in my opinion, it costs $100 US more, and for that you're only getting around a 30% performance boost. So it's around half the margin we saw from the 2070 to the 3070, with an extra $100 US tacked on top. So for the 4070 to be as exciting as the 3070 was, it would really need to be the 4070 Ti, as in the 4070 Ti would need to be called the 4070, and ideally it'd need to cost $500 US. Though if we were getting around, let's say, 60% more performance and a bump in VRAM capacity, $600 would be a lot easier to swallow. As it stands though, the RTX 4070, I'm afraid to say, is really as good as it gets now at $600, especially if you care about stuff like power efficiency, supporting modern technologies such as frame generation and AV1 encoding. The good news though, I guess for those of you who have been holding out with something like an RTX 2070, is that the new 4070 is offering around twice the performance for a $100 premium, so that's not bad. That said, it's really not amazing either across a 5-year timeline, but still, I think anyone upgrading from an RTX 2070 to a 4070 will be very happy and quite blown away by the extra performance. For RTX 3070 owners though, the 4070, it's less than ideal. You're having to pay 20% more than you did originally for just 30% more performance, and a minimal increase in VRAM capacity. I also fear that 3070 owners will go from being shafted by 8GB of VRAM to being shafted by 12GB on an even more expensive product. So I would recommend that 3070 owners just skip this generation and see what the GeForce 50 series has to offer. Of course, while any potential issues with the 12GB VRAM buffer is yet to be seen, and while some people, bless their hearts, aren't convinced that 8GB of VRAM is going the way of the dodo, at least at the high end, the next 12 months are likely going to be a bit of a brutal experience. Quite an eye-opener, I'd say. As for 12GB cards, I'm really not sure what the future holds there. I think mid-range gaming will be perfectly fine for the next few years, but at this point, it's really anyone's guess. Ideally, I believe you'll want at least 16GB moving forward at the sort of higher end of the mid-range, let's say, certainly at the high end, which is why I can't really stomach the 12GB 4070 Ti at $800 US. Just a bit too much money there for a lot too little VRAM. On that note, if you have held out this long with an RTX 2070 or something similar from that era, it might pay to wait a little bit longer to see what AMD come out with, though I'm not super confident we're going to see anything terribly compelling from them, but you never know, and like I said, if you've waited this long, what's a few more months? And with that, I'm going to end this video. So if you found it useful, give it a like. Hopefully those of you who have an RTX 2070, 2070 Super, 2060 Super, something around this level of performance, found this data useful and now know whether after all those years you should pull a pin on something like this. I'm sure you were hoping by this point in time you were getting something a bit more substantial, but that is the current market. Whether or not you're willing to hold out for another GPU generation, I'll leave that one up to you. But anyway, you should have all the facts and figures you now need to make an informed purchasing decision thing. You know, when you get information and then you buy the stuff. Float Plane Patreon, if you want to support the channel more directly, get access to either, well, you can sign up to either one of those things. I'm not doing a good job of this outro, am I? I don't know what's... Balin, can you edit this out?
Yeah.
Okay, Balin can fix this. Float Plane Patreon, sign up to either one of those things. You'll get access to a monthly live stream. Tim and myself get together and I do even more waffling than I am right now. So I don't know if that's worth paying for. Behind the scenes content, Q&As, and an exclusive Discord server for members only where I do a lot of waffling. So again, don't know if that's worth signing up for, but I'll leave that with you. A bit like the RTX 4070. I'm just going to wrap this one up. Thanks for watching. I'm your host, Steve. See you next time.